The milk came anyway. Evelyn Hart sat in the corner of her sister's kitchen, arms wrapped tight around her ribs, trying to make herself smaller. Outside, snow piled against the windows in drifts that hadn't stopped growing for 3 days. Inside, her body kept producing what it no longer needed. Her chest burned, the fabric of her dress stuck to her skin where it had soaked through again. She'd tried binding herself with strips of old cotton, tried cold compresses, tried not eating, tried praying. Nothing worked. Her daughter had been dead for 11 days, buried in frozen ground under a wooden cross her brother-in-law had hammered together in 20 minutes. And still her body insisted the baby was coming back. "You need to do something about that," her sister Margaret said from across the room, not looking up from the potatoes she was peeling. Her voice was flat, tired. "It's not decent." Evelyn didn't answer. There wasn't anything to say that Margaret would want to hear. "I mean it, Evelyn. Robert says people are talking." "Let them talk." Margaret's knife stopped moving. "You don't get to be selfish about this. We have a reputation to think about. You living here, looking like that, people see things. They make assumptions." "What assumptions?" Evelyn's voice came out sharper than she meant. "That I had a baby and she died? That's not an assumption. That's what happened. Don't take that tone with me." Margaret slammed the knife down on the table. A potato rolled onto the floor. Neither of them picked it up. "You think this is easy for me? Having you here, watching you walk around like a ghost, listening to Robert complain every night about another mouth to feed when we can barely—" She stopped herself, but the words were already out there between them. Another mouth to feed. Evelyn looked down at her hands. They were chapped and red from washing Margaret's floors, Margaret's laundry, Margaret's dishes. She'd been doing that for 6 years, ever since their parents died and Margaret married Robert Finch and made it clear that Evelyn's place in the household was earned, not given. The baby was supposed to change that. Evelyn had met Thomas Green at a church social, a quiet man who worked at the mill and didn't seem to mind that she came with nothing. They'd married in October. By December, she was pregnant. By January, Thomas was dead, crushed under a snapped loading cable at the mill yard. And by February, in the middle of the worst blizzard anyone could remember, Evelyn's daughter was born too early, too small, and didn't live long enough to be named. Margaret stood up and walked to the window, arms crossed. Robert talked to Pastor Monroe. "There's a position available at the boarding house in Millerton. Cleaning rooms, helping with meals. You could start next month." "Millerton is 40 miles away." "Exactly." The word hung in the cold air like a sentencing. Evelyn stood up slowly, feeling the weight of her own exhaustion pull at her bones. "You want me gone." "I want you to have a chance at a real life," Margaret said, but she still wasn't looking at her. "Staying here, it's not good for you. You'll waste away in this house. At least in Millerton you'd meet people. Maybe someone decent who doesn't know about everything." "Someone who doesn't know I'm cursed, you mean?" Margaret flinched. "I didn't say that. You didn't have to. The whole town's already said it for you." Evelyn grabbed her shawl from the hook by the door and wrapped it around her shoulders. The fabric smelled like smoke and old snow. "I'm going to get water." "Evelyn?" But she was already out the door, stepping into the brutal cold that hit her lungs like a fist. The well was frozen again. Evelyn stood there with the bucket in her hand, staring at the solid sheet of ice covering the surface, and felt something inside her chest crack a little wider. Everything was frozen. The well, the ground, the future Margaret had just tried to wrap up like a gift and shove into her hands. Millerton, a boarding house, a new start where nobody knew her name. Except Evelyn didn't want to be someone nobody knew. She wanted to be someone who mattered, someone whose hands did something other than scrub floors and whose body didn't betray her every morning with milk that had nowhere to go. She heard the voices before she saw them. 2 men were walking up the road toward town, their breath coming out in clouds. She recognized them. Henry Colfax and Jim Warren, ranch hands who worked for different outfits but drank at the same saloon. They hadn't seen her yet, half hidden behind the side of the house. "Ain't my problem," Henry was saying. "Man made his bed. Now he's got a lie in it." "Still," Jim said, shaking his head, "them babies ain't got nothing to do with the bad blood between Bennett and the mining company. They're dying, Henry. That's what I heard. Starving to death because nobody'll help." Then he should have thought about that before he ran his mouth about the cave-in.
Got 3 good men blacklisted from every job in the valley. You expect folks to forget that just because his wife died? I ain't saying forget. I'm saying those are babies.
Henry spat into the snow. Babies or not, Cole Bennett made his choice. Let him live with it. They kept walking, their voices fading into the wind. Evelyn stood there, bucket still in her hand, heart pounding in her chest. She knew the name. Everyone in the valley knew Cole Bennett. He'd come to the territory 5 years ago with money from back east and bought a piece of land that nobody wanted. Too remote, too rocky, too close to the ridge where the mining company had collapsed a tunnel and killed a dozen men. Bennett had been the one to testify against the company, said they'd cut corners and ignored warnings. He'd won the case, got the mine shut down, and made enemies out of half the ranchers who'd invested in it. His wife had been pregnant when the trial ended. Evelyn remembered seeing her once in town, a small woman with dark hair and a tired smile. And now she was dead, and her babies were dying. "Nobody'll help," Jim had said. Evelyn looked down at her chest, at the damp fabric clinging to her skin, and felt her hands start to shake. She didn't decide right away. She told herself that all through the afternoon, through supper, through the long silence while Robert read his paper and Margaret mended a shirt by the fire, she told herself she was just thinking, just considering, just running through the logic of something that might be completely insane. But by the time the house went dark and the wind started howling against the walls, Evelyn knew what she was going to do. She packed quietly. One spare dress, a coat that used to belong to Thomas, a wool blanket. She didn't take much because she didn't have much, and because she didn't want to make noise pulling things out of drawers. Margaret's horse was in the small barn out back. Evelyn had never stolen anything in her life, but she saddled the mare in the dark and told herself she'd bring it back. Somehow. Eventually. The cold hit her the second she stepped outside. It was the kind of cold that didn't care if you were ready for it or not, the kind that made your lungs ache and your fingers go numb even inside gloves. The snow had stopped falling, but the wind whipped it into blinding sheets across the open ground. Evelyn pulled herself into the saddle and turned the horse toward the ridge. The Bennett Ranch was 8 miles northwest, up through a pass that was barely a road even in good weather. In a blizzard, it was suicide. But Evelyn had stopped caring about what made sense somewhere around the 3rd mile, when her hands lost all feeling and her face went numb, and the only thing keeping her moving forward was the image of 2 babies she'd never seen, starving in the arms of a man the whole world had abandoned. She thought about her own daughter, the way she'd been so small, so impossibly fragile, the way Evelyn had held her for 20 minutes before she stopped breathing, whispering promises into her tiny ear about all the things they'd do together, all the ways Evelyn would protect her. She hadn't been able to keep a single one of those promises. But maybe she could keep someone else's baby alive. The wind screamed, the horse stumbled, Evelyn held on. Basheg. She almost missed the ranch entirely. It was just a dark shape against the snow. A cabin with a barn and a few outbuildings that looked like they were one strong gust away from collapsing. No lights in the windows. No smoke from the chimney. Evelyn slid off the horse and her legs nearly gave out. She grabbed the saddle to steady herself, then forced her body to move toward the door. She knocked. Once. Twice. Nothing. She knocked again, harder, and this time she heard something. A crash, like something being knocked over, and then footsteps. The door jerked open. The man standing there looked like he hadn't slept in a week. His hair was wild. His shirt was stained, and his eyes were the kind of hollow that came from watching everything you loved fall apart in real time. He was holding something wrapped in a blanket, and it took Evelyn a second to realize it was moving. "What?" he said. His voice was hoarse. "Wrecked." Evelyn opened her mouth, but the words didn't come. She'd rehearsed this on the ride over, planned out what she'd say, how she'd explain. But now that she was standing here, looking at Cole Bennett and the dying baby in his arms, everything she'd prepared fell apart. "I heard," she started, stopped, tried again. "I heard you needed help." "I don't need help. I need a miracle." He started to close the door. "Wait." Evelyn reached out and grabbed the edge of the door. "Please, just let me in. Let me try." "Try what? You a doctor? A nurse?" "Because I've had 3 women come out here in the last week, and every single one of them took one look at my boys and walked right back out." "I'm not a nurse," Evelyn said. Her voice was shaking. But I can feed them. Cole stared at her.
What? My baby died, Evelyn said, and saying it out loud to a stranger felt like ripping open a wound that had barely started to scab over. 11 days ago. But my body, it doesn't know that yet. So if your boys need milk, I have it. And if you turn me away, they're going to die. And her voice cracked. I can't watch another baby die. I can't. For a long moment, Cole didn't move. He just stood there, staring at her like he wasn't sure she was real.
Then he stepped back and opened the door wider. Get inside before you freeze to death. The cabin was a disaster. Evelyn could see that even in the dim light from the single candle burning on the table, dishes piled in the basin, laundry scattered across the floor, a crib in the corner with another bundle of blankets that was making a thin, gasping sound. Cole set the baby he was holding down on the table and turned to the crib, pulling out the second twin. Both of them were so small, too small. And the sound they were making, that weak, exhausted crying that barely had any strength left, made Evelyn's chest tighten with something that felt like panic and purpose all mixed together. They won't take a bottle, Cole said. His voice was flat, defeated. I've tried everything. Goat's milk, cow's milk, sugar water. They're starving and I don't know how to... He stopped himself, jaw clenched. What do you need me to do? Evelyn unwrapped her coat with shaking hands and sat down in the chair by the fire. Bring me one of them. Cole hesitated, then picked up the nearest twin, a boy with dark hair and skin so pale it looked gray. He placed him in Evelyn's arms like he was made of glass. The baby was barely moving. His eyes were closed, his mouth slack. Evelyn's heart dropped. Come on, she whispered, adjusting him against her chest. Come on, sweetheart. You can do this. She unlaced the front of her dress with one hand, ignoring the embarrassment, ignoring everything except the desperate hope that this would work, that she could do this one thing right. The baby didn't latch at first. He was too weak. Evelyn tried again, stroking his cheek the way she'd done with her daughter, whispering soft, encouraging sounds. And then, finally, he latched. The relief hit her so hard she almost sobbed. The baby drank, weak at first, then stronger, his tiny hands curling against her skin. Cole made a sound like all the air had just been punched out of his lungs. He dropped into the chair across from her, head in his hands. He's eating, Cole said, and his voice broke on the words. He's actually... Get the other one, Evelyn said quietly. Cole moved like a man waking up from a nightmare. He grabbed the second twin and brought him over, and Evelyn shifted carefully, adjusting both boys so they could both feed. It was awkward, painful. Her body had been aching for days, and now the relief of the baby's nursing made her head swim. But she didn't care. She sat there in a stranger's cabin, in the middle of a blizzard, feeding two babies who weren't hers, and for the first time since her daughter died, Evelyn felt like her body was doing something that mattered. The cabin was silent, except for the wind outside and the soft sounds of the twins nursing. Cole sat across from her, elbows on his knees, staring at his sons like he still couldn't believe they were going to survive. Why'd you come here? He finally asked. Evelyn looked down at the babies. Because nobody else would. You don't even know me. I know enough. She met his eyes. I know the whole town thinks you're cursed. I know they blame you for the mine closing. I know your wife just died and you've got two babies and no help, and everyone's decided that's what you deserve. She paused. I know what that feels like. Cole's jaw tightened. What happened to your baby? She was born too early, didn't make it through the first day. Evelyn's voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. The town decided it was because I was being punished, for marrying Thomas too fast, for getting pregnant out of wedlock, even though we were married, just barely. Doesn't matter, they made up their minds. So you rode out here in a blizzard to prove them wrong? No. Evelyn looked back down at the twins. I rode out here because these boys deserved a chance, and because I needed to know my body could still do something good. Cole was quiet for a long time. Then he stood up, walked to the fireplace, and threw another log on the flames. You can stay, he said, not looking at her. As long as you need to. As long as they need you. I don't need charity. Good. Because I'm not offering it. He turned around, and for the first time Evelyn saw something other than exhaustion in his face. I'm offering you a job. You keep my boys alive, I'll give you a place to sleep and food to eat, and I won't ask questions about where you came from or why you're really here. That sound fair? Evelyn thought about Margaret's kitchen, about Millerton and the boarding house, and the life of being nobody in a town that didn't care. She looked down at the two boys in her arms, both of them finally quiet, finally safe. That sounds fair? Ja. The first night was chaos. The twins woke up every 2 hours screaming, and Evelyn stumbled through the darkness trying to figure out which one needed what. Cole helped when he could, changing them, walking them, holding them, while Evelyn tried to get 5 minutes of sleep sitting upright in a chair. By dawn, she felt like she'd been trampled by a horse. But the boys were alive. They were crying, really crying now, not that weak gasping sound from before. And that meant they had strength. That meant they were going to make it. Cole made coffee that tasted like burnt dirt and handed her a cup without saying anything. They sat at the table in silence, both too exhausted to talk. "What are their names?" Evelyn finally asked. Cole looked surprised, like he'd forgotten they had names. "James and Daniel. My wife picked them before—" He stopped. "James is the one with the birthmark on his shoulder. Daniel's the loud one." "They're both loud." "Yeah." Cole almost smiled. "Yeah, they are." Evelyn drank her terrible coffee and watched the early light come through the window. The storm had finally stopped. The world outside was buried in snow, everything white and still and impossibly quiet. "The town's going to lose their minds when they find out you're here," Cole said. "I know. They're going to say terrible things about you." "They already do." Cole looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time since she'd arrived. "You sure you want to do this?" Evelyn thought about Margaret's face when she'd set another mouth to feed. She thought about the boarding house in Millerton and the idea of spending the rest of her life being someone people didn't remember. She thought about the twins, asleep in the crib, their tiny chests rising and falling in rhythm. "I'm sure." "All right then." Cole stood up and grabbed his coat. "I've got to check the barn, make sure the horses made it through the night. You need anything, just holler." He left, and Evelyn sat alone in the cabin with 2 sleeping babies and the overwhelming realization that she'd just burned every bridge she had left. She should have been terrified. Instead, she felt something she hadn't felt in months. She felt needed. Margaret showed up on the 3rd day. Evelyn was outside hanging laundry on a line Cole had strung between 2 posts, her fingers numb despite the gloves. The twins were inside, finally sleeping after a rough morning where Daniel had refused to eat and James had spit up everything he'd managed to get down. She heard the horse before she saw it, the sound of hooves crunching through snow making her turn around fast enough that she dropped the shirt she'd been pinning up. Her sister sat rigid in the saddle, face tight with something that looked like fury and fear mixed together in equal parts. "You stole my horse," Margaret said. "I borrowed it." "You stole it, Evelyn. Do you have any idea what Robert did when he found the barn empty? Do you know what people are saying?" Evelyn bent down and picked up the shirt, shaking the snow off it. "I can guess." "No, you can't." Margaret climbed down from the saddle, and Evelyn noticed her hands were shaking. "They're saying you lost your mind, that grief drove you crazy and you ran off in the middle of the night to do something." She stopped, looking at the cabin behind Evelyn like it might bite her. "Is it true? Are you really staying here with him? His name is Cole Bennett, and yes. Have you completely forgotten every shred of decency you were raised with?" Margaret's voice climbed higher. "You're living under the same roof as a man you're not married to, a man the entire valley wants nothing to do with, and you think that's, what, acceptable?" "I think his sons would be dead if I hadn't come." "That's not your responsibility." "Then whose is it?" Evelyn met her sister's eyes. "Yours? The church ladies who couldn't be bothered to ride out here. Every woman in town who decided these babies deserved to starve because they don't like their father?" Margaret flinched. "That's not fair." "None of this is fair, Margaret. But I'm done pretending I care what people think is proper when babies are dying and nobody lifts a finger to help. So you'll just throw away your entire reputation? Any chance you had at a decent future?" "What future?" Evelyn's voice came out harder than she meant it to. "The boarding house in Millerton, where I'd spend the rest of my life scrubbing floors for strangers? That future?" Margaret looked away, jaw tight.
I was trying to help you. You were trying to get rid of me. The words sat between them like a stone dropped in still water. Margaret's face went pale, then red. How dare you? It's the truth, Evelyn said quietly. And we both know it. I was another mouth to feed. Another reminder that your sister couldn't keep a husband alive or a baby breathing. You wanted me gone so you wouldn't have to look at me anymore. That's not... Margaret stopped. Her hands were fists at her sides. You're being cruel. I'm being honest. Honesty doesn't keep you warm at night. It doesn't put food on the table or give you a roof over your head. Margaret gestured at the cabin. What do you think is going to happen here, Evelyn? You think you can just play house with some rancher everyone hates and it'll all work out fine? The town will destroy you. They'll make sure you never work anywhere, never have anything, never... I don't care. Margaret stared at her. What? I said I don't care. Evelyn picked up another shirt from the basket and pinned it to the line. Let them talk. Let them say whatever they want. I'm keeping 2 babies alive, and that matters more than what anyone thinks about it. Her sister stood there for a long moment, breathing hard. Then she shook her head slowly, like she was looking at a stranger. You've changed. Maybe I had to. Margaret climbed back onto the horse without another word. She turned it around, then paused and looked back. When this falls apart, and it will, don't come crying to me. She rode off before Evelyn could answer. Evelyn stood in the snow, watching her sister disappear into the tree line, and felt something cold settle in her chest that had nothing to do with the weather. She'd known this was coming, known that choosing to stay here meant cutting ties with the only family she had left, but knowing it and feeling it were 2 different things. The door opened behind her. Cole stepped out, one twin in his arms. Heard voices, he said. My sister. She wanted the horse back. Did you give it to her? Yes. Cole nodded slowly. He looked tired. He always looked tired these days, but there was something else in his face now, something that might have been respect. You all right? Evelyn thought about the question. Was she all right? Her sister hated her. The town thought she'd lost her mind. She was living in a cabin with a man she barely knew, taking care of babies that weren't hers, and she had no idea what came next. I'm fine, she said. Liar. The word startled a laugh out of her, short and surprised. Cole almost smiled. Daniel's hungry again, he said. Thought you should know. He went back inside and Evelyn followed, leaving the laundry half hung in the freezing air. The town found out, of course. Towns always did. It took less than a week for the whispers to start, and by the second week those whispers had turned into full conversations happening in every store, every saloon, every church pew across the valley. Cole heard about it when he rode into town for supplies. He'd left Evelyn at the ranch with the twins, told her he'd be back by evening, and tried not to think about what people would say when they saw him. He made it about 10 feet into the general store before Henry Colfax blocked his path. Heard you got yourself some help out at the ranch, Henry said. His voice was loud enough that everyone in the store could hear. Real charitable of the Hart woman, taking pity on you like that. Cole kept his face neutral. I need 20 pounds of flour and some coffee. You going to sell it to me or just stand there running your mouth? Oh, I'll sell it to you, just making conversation. Henry leaned against the counter, arms crossed. Must be nice having a woman around the house again, especially one so grateful for the shelter. Cole's hands clenched into fists. Watch your mouth. I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. Woman shows up in the middle of the night, moves into your cabin, and you expect people to believe it's all innocent? Come on, Bennett. We weren't born yesterday. She's feeding my sons, that's all. Sure she is? Henry's grin widened. And I'm sure that's the only thing keeping her warm at night. Cole hit him. Hit. It wasn't a planned thing. One second he was standing there trying to hold on to the last shred of his self-control, and the next his fist was connecting with Henry's jaw hard enough to knock him into the counter. Jars of preserves crashed to the floor. Someone shouted. Henry came back swinging, and then they were on the ground, fists flying, blood on the floorboards. Jim Warren pulled them apart, shouting something Cole couldn't hear over the ringing in his ears. Henry's nose was bleeding. Cole's knuckles were split open. Get out, the store owner said, pointing at Cole. Get out and don't come back. Cole grabbed his hat off the floor and left without the supplies he'd come for. He rode home in the dark, jaw aching, hands throbbing, and tried to figure out how to explain to Evelyn
that he'd just made everything worse. She was waiting on his porch when he got back, wrapped in a blanket with both twins sleeping in a basket at her feet. "You're bleeding," she said. "It's nothing." "Cole." He climbed down from the horse and tied it off without looking at her. "Got into it with Henry Colfax at the store. He said some things. I hit him. They kicked me out." "What kind of things?" "Doesn't matter." "It does if you're bleeding over it." Cole turned around. Evelyn was standing now, the blanket pulled tight around her shoulders, eyes steady on his. "He said you were keeping me warm at night," Cole said bluntly. "Implied you were trading favors for a roof over your head. I told him to shut his mouth. He didn't, so I shut it for him." Evelyn's face didn't change. "And now the whole town thinks you're defending your mistress." "I don't care what they think." "You should." She sat back down on the porch step, careful not to wake the twins. "Because this isn't just about you anymore. Every time you fight someone, every time you make a scene, it makes things harder. For both of us." "So I'm supposed to just let them talk?" "I didn't say that." Evelyn looked up at him. "But hitting people isn't going to make them stop. It's just going to prove they were right about you." Cole sat down next to her, wincing as his ribs protested. He'd taken a few hits he hadn't felt in the moment. "I can't just stand there and let them say that garbage about you." "Why not?" The question caught him off guard. "Because it's not true." "Since when does that matter?" Evelyn's voice was tired. "People don't care about the truth. They care about the story. And the story right now is that you're a cursed rancher who got a desperate widow to move in and play house. That's what they want to believe. Nothing you do is going to change that. So what? We just accept it? We survive it." She looked down at the twins. "We keep these boys alive. We keep this ranch running. And we don't give them anything real to use against us. That's how we win." Cole was quiet for a long moment. "You're smarter than I gave you credit for. Most people are smarter than you give them credit for. You just never stop hitting things long enough to notice." Despite everything, Cole laughed. It was a rough sound, rusty from disuse, but it felt good. "Fair enough." They sat there in the cold, shoulders almost touching, watching the snow start to fall again in soft, lazy flakes. Inside, the fire was burning low. The twins were asleep. Everything was quiet except for the wind in the trees. "Thank you," Cole said. "For what?" "For not leaving. After everything." Evelyn turned to look at him, and for the first time Cole noticed how young she actually was. She couldn't have been more than 25, 26 at most, but she carried herself like someone who'd already lived 3 lifetimes worth of grief. "Where would I go?" she asked simply. It wasn't an answer. It was something sadder than that. The weeks bled together after that. Evelyn fell into a rhythm she didn't know she needed. Wake with the twins before dawn, feed them, change them, walk them when they cried, sing to them when walking wasn't enough. Cole worked the ranch from sunup to sundown, fixing fences that had collapsed under the weight of snow, checking on livestock, chopping enough firewood to keep them from freezing. They were surviving, barely, but surviving all the same. Evelyn learned things about Cole in pieces. He didn't talk much, but when he did, it mattered. She learned his wife's name had been Caroline, that they'd met back east before he came out here with dreams of building something that mattered, that she'd been scared of the isolation, but loved him enough to try anyway. She hated winter, Cole said one night while Evelyn was mending one of his shirts by the fire. Used to say it felt like the cold was trying to bury us alive. She wasn't wrong. No. He stared into the flames. She wasn't. Do you miss her? The question came out before Evelyn could stop it. She expected him to shut down, to tell her it was none of her business, but instead he just nodded slowly. Every day. But it's different than I thought it would be. He looked at the twins, both of them asleep in the crib Evelyn had scrubbed clean and lined with fresh blankets. I thought losing her would kill me, and it almost did. But then I realized I couldn't die because they needed me, and that was worse somehow. Being needed when you've got nothing left to give. Evelyn understood that more than she wanted to admit. She would have liked you, Cole added. You don't know that. I do. Caroline didn't have patience for people who pretended to be something they weren't. You don't pretend. I don't have the energy for it, Cole almost smiled. Yeah, me neither. Sets. March came in hard and mean, with storms that lasted days and temperatures that dropped so low the inside of the cabin windows frosted over. Evelyn spent most of her time huddled by the fire with the twins, trying to keep them warm while Cole went out to make sure the animals hadn't frozen to death. It was during one of those storms that Daniel got sick. He started fussing more than usual, refusing to eat, and by evening his skin was burning hot to the touch. Evelyn tried everything she could think of, cool cloths, keeping him calm, forcing him to drink, but nothing worked. His fever climbed higher. "We need a doctor," she said. Cole looked up from where he was pacing with James, who was crying in sympathy with his brother. "Town's 8 miles away in this weather. I'd never make it." "Then what do we do?" "I don't know." Evelyn looked down at Daniel, at his flushed face and labored breathing, and felt panic claw its way up her throat. She'd kept these boys alive for weeks, fed them, cared for them, learned every sound they made and what it meant. She couldn't lose one now. "Get me clean water and whatever alcohol you have," she said, forcing her voice to stay steady. "Evelyn, just do it." Cole moved fast, bringing her a basin of water he'd boiled and a bottle of whiskey he kept for emergencies. Evelyn stripped Daniel down to his diaper and started sponging him with the cool water, talking to him the whole time in a low, soothing voice. "You're all right, sweetheart. You're going to be fine. Just let the fever break. Come on." Hours passed. The storm raged outside. Daniel's fever stayed high. Evelyn didn't sleep. She sat by the fire with the baby in her lap, changing the cool cloths every few minutes, watching his chest rise and fall, terrified that each breath might be his last. Cole sat across from her, holding James, neither of them speaking. Somewhere around midnight, Daniel's fever broke. Evelyn felt it the second it happened. His skin went from burning to just warm, his breathing evened out, and he finally fell into a real sleep instead of that feverish half-consciousness. She slumped forward, pressing her forehead against the baby's, and started crying. Not loud, not dramatic, just quiet, exhausted tears that she'd been holding back for hours. Cole got up and sat down next to her. He didn't say anything, just put James in the crib and sat there while Evelyn fell apart. When she finally pulled herself together, she looked up at him with swollen eyes and a runny nose and probably looked like a complete mess. "I thought I was going to lose him," she whispered. "I know. I can't do that again, Cole. I can't watch another baby die." "You didn't. He's all right. You saved him. This time. But what about next time? What if it's worse? What if—" Cole reached out and took her hand. It was the first time he'd touched her beyond the necessities of passing babies back and forth, and the warmth of it shocked her into silence. "We'll figure it out," he said. "Same as we always do. Together." Evelyn looked down at their hands, at the way his completely engulfed hers, rough and calloused and steady. "Together," she repeated. It felt like a promise neither of them was quite ready to make. The town came for them in April. Evelyn was outside planting a small garden when she heard the horses. 4 of them, carrying men she recognized from church and the town council. They didn't look friendly. Cole must have heard them too because he came out of the barn fast, wiping his hands on his pants, jaw already set in that stubborn line she'd come to know too well. "Bennett," said Robert Finch, and Evelyn's stomach dropped. Her brother-in-law sat on his horse like he owned the world, looking down at Cole with barely disguised contempt. "We need to have a conversation." "Then talk." "Not out here." Robert's eyes slid to Evelyn, and she saw something ugly flash across his face. Inside, man to man. "Anything you've got to say, you can say in front of her." "This ain't a negotiation." Cole crossed his arms. "Then I guess we're done here." "We're not done." Another man rode forward, Pastor Monroe, looking uncomfortable but determined. "Cole, the town council has some concerns about the situation you've got going on out here." "What situation would that be?" "You know exactly what situation. You've got an unmarried woman living under your roof. People are talking. It's causing scandal." "People always talk. That's not my problem." "It becomes your problem when it affects the community," Robert cut in. "You want to trade in town? You want to sell your cattle? You need people to be willing to do business with you. Right now, you're making that real difficult." "So what? You rode all the way out here to tell me to kick her out?" We're telling you to do the right thing. Either send her away or marry her. Make it proper." Evelyn's hands froze in the dirt. She hadn't expected that. Cole's face went dark. "You've got some nerve riding onto my land and telling me how to live." "It's not just your life anymore," Pastor Monroe said. "What about those boys? You want them growing up in a house everyone knows is built on sin?" "Sin?" Cole took a step forward. "Where was all this moral outrage when my sons were starving and not one person in your precious community would lift a finger to help? Where were you then, Pastor?" "That's not—" "Get off my land." "Cole, I said get off my land." The men hesitated. Then Robert leaned forward in his saddle. "You're making a mistake, Bennett. We're trying to help you here."
"Help?" Cole laughed, and it was the ugliest sound Evelyn had ever heard. "You've never helped me. None of you. The only person who gave a damn whether my boys lived or died is standing right there." He pointed at Evelyn. "So if you've got a problem with her being here, you can take it up with me directly. But I'm warning you, I'm done playing nice." "You threatening us?" "I'm telling you the truth. Now get off my land before I make you." The men exchanged looks. Then slowly, they turned their horses around and rode off. Cole stood there, fists clenched, breathing hard. Evelyn got up from the garden and walked over to him. "Cole, don't. You can't just— I said don't." He turned to look at her, and his eyes were burning. "I'm not sending you away. I don't care what they say. I don't care what they threaten. You're staying. And what happens when they stop trading with you, when they cut you off completely?" "Then I'll find another way. There is no other way. This is the only town for 50 miles. I'll figure it out." "Cole, listen to me. No. You listen." He grabbed her shoulders, not rough, but firm enough that she stopped talking. "I'm not my wife's husband anymore. I'm not the man who followed rules and tried to make everyone happy. That man died with Caroline. All I've got left are those boys and you, and I will burn this whole valley down before I let anyone take either away from me. You understand?" Evelyn stared at him, heart pounding. She saw something in his face that scared her and thrilled her in equal measure, a kind of fierce, reckless determination that made her believe he actually meant what he said. "I understand," she whispered. "Good." He let her go and walked back toward the barn, leaving Evelyn standing there with dirt on her hands and the terrible knowledge that everything had just changed. That night, after the twins were asleep, Cole built up the fire and poured 2 glasses of whiskey. "I need to tell you something," he said, handing one to Evelyn. She took it, even though she rarely drank. "All right. The ranch isn't doing well. Even before Caroline died, we were struggling. The mine closure cost me most of my buyers, and I've been scraping by on savings. If the town actually follows through and cuts me off from trade—" He stopped, jaw tight. "We might not make it through next winter." Evelyn sipped the whiskey. It burned going down. "So what do we do?" "I don't know. I could try to find buyers in other territories, but that means traveling, and I can't leave the boys. I could watch them. For weeks at a time, while managing the ranch alone. I've done harder things." Cole looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time all over again. "You really mean that?" "I wouldn't say it if I didn't." He drank his whiskey in one swallow and set the glass down harder than necessary. "Why are you still here, Evelyn? Really? You could have left a dozen times by now, gone back to your sister, found work somewhere else. Why stay?" Evelyn thought about how to answer that. She could tell him about the twins, about how she needed to feel like her body mattered. She could talk about having nowhere else to go, no other options. She could keep it simple and safe. Instead, she told him the truth. "Because for the first time since my daughter died, I wake up and have a reason to get out of bed. Because those boys need me, and you need me, and that matters more than whatever the town thinks." She paused. "And because you're the only person who's ever looked at me and seen something other than a failure." Cole was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached across the table and took her hand again, like he had the night Daniel's fever broke. "You're not a failure," he said quietly. "Neither are you." They sat there, hands linked across the rough wooden table, and something shifted in the space between them. Something neither of them was ready to name, but both of them felt. Outside, the wind picked up. Inside, the fire crackled. The twins slept on, oblivious to the fact that the 2 people keeping them alive were falling into something that looked a lot like hope. The town escalated a week later.
Cole rode into the settlement to try to buy feed for the horses and found every store closed to him. Literally closed. Doors locked, shutters drawn, even when he could see people moving around inside. He stood in the middle of the street trying to keep his temper in check when Jim Warren walked up. They had a meeting, Jim said quietly. Town council. Voted to ban anyone from doing business with you until you resolve your household situation.
That's insane.
Maybe, but it's legal. Store owners have the right to refuse service.
Cole felt rage build in his chest like a living thing.
So what? They're just going to starve me out?
That's the idea. Jim looked uncomfortable. Look, for what it's worth, I didn't vote for it. Neither did a few others. But we got outvoted.
Who pushed it?
Your brother-in-law, Robert Finch. He's got it out for you, Bennett. Says you're a danger to the community's moral fiber.
He just wants his sister-in-law back so he doesn't have to feel guilty about kicking her out.
Jim shrugged.
Probably, but that doesn't change the situation. You're blacklisted. Unless you send the Heart Woman away, you're on your own. Cole rode home in a fury, hands shaking on the reins. He found Evelyn in the garden, the twins in a basket at her feet, both of them babbling at clouds. She looked up when she heard the horse and knew immediately something was wrong. They blacklisted me, Cole said without dismounting. Every store, every trader, we're cut off. Evelyn stood up slowly. For how long? Until I send you away. Then send me away. What? You heard me. She brushed dirt off her hands. Send me away, buy what you need, and I'll come back once things settle down. That's not how this works. They want you gone permanently. Then we'll figure something else out. There's nothing else to figure out. Cole climbed down from the horse, angrier than she'd ever seen him. Don't you get it? They're trying to destroy me, and they're using you to do it. So let them win. Like hell. Cole, be realistic. You can't run a ranch without supplies. You need them more than you need me. That's where you're wrong. The words hung in the air between them, sharp and clear. Evelyn stared at him. What? I need you more. Cole's voice was rough. The boys need you. This place needs you. And He stopped himself, jaw clenched. I'm not losing you because a bunch of small-minded hypocrites can't handle the idea of people helping each other. This isn't just about helping anymore. No, it's not. They looked at each other across the garden, and Evelyn felt her heart do something complicated in her chest. She'd known this was coming, had felt it building for weeks, maybe longer, but hearing Cole say it out loud made it real in a way that terrified her. What are we doing? She asked quietly. I don't know, but whatever it is, we're doing it together. Daniel started fussing in the basket. Evelyn picked him up automatically, settling him against her shoulder, and watched Cole's face soften the way it always did when he looked at his sons. Together, she repeated, and this time it didn't feel like a promise they weren't ready for. It felt like the only truth they had left. They made it through May on stubbornness and whatever Cole could hunt or trade for in settlements 2 days' ride away. Evelyn learned to stretch every pound of flour, every jar of preserves, every scrap of meat until there was nothing left to stretch. The twins grew anyway, getting heavier and louder and more demanding every day. James started teething and screamed through entire nights. Daniel learned to roll over and immediately tried to roll himself right off the bed every chance he got. Evelyn was exhausted in a way that went deeper than her bones, but she kept moving because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant acknowledging that they were running out of time. Cole came back from his latest trip to a neighboring territory looking worse than when he'd left. He'd been gone 5 days, and Evelyn had managed the ranch alone, feeding the twins and the livestock, fixing a broken fence post, patching a hole in the barn roof that had started leaking during a rainstorm. She'd done it all without complaint because complaining didn't fix anything. How bad? She asked when he walked through the door. He didn't answer right away, just set down the 2 small sacks he'd managed to trade for and sat heavily in the chair by the cold fireplace. Cole, prices are up everywhere. Word's gotten around about the blacklist. People know I'm desperate, so they're charging double, triple what things are worth. He rubbed his face with both hands. I traded my good saddle for 20 pounds of grain and some salt pork. That's it. That's all I could get. Evelyn looked at the sacks. 20 pounds of grain wouldn't last them 3 weeks. Not with the horses to feed, too. We'll make it work, she said, even though she had no idea how. How? How are we supposed to make it work when I can barely afford to keep the animals alive, let alone us? We'll figure something out. We always do. That's not a plan, Evelyn. That's just hope. And hope doesn't feed anyone. She wanted to argue, to tell him he was wrong, but the truth was, he wasn't. They were failing. Slowly, quietly, but failing all the same. And sooner or later, something was going to break. James started crying from the bedroom. Daniel joined in half a second later, like he couldn't stand to let his brother have all the attention. Evelyn went to get them, and Cole stayed in the chair, staring at nothing. The woman arrived on a Tuesday afternoon in a carriage so nice it looked like it had gotten lost on its way to somewhere important. Evelyn was outside beating dust out of a rug when she heard the wheels crunching up the drive. She straightened up, squinting against the sun, and watched a driver help a woman down from the carriage with the kind of careful attention usually reserved for something fragile and expensive. The woman was probably in her mid-30s, dressed in a deep blue traveling suit that still looked fresh despite the dusty road. Her hair was pinned up perfectly, her posture straight, everything about her screaming money and education and the kind of life Evelyn had never even glimpsed. "Good afternoon," the woman said, smiling in a way that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I'm looking for Mr. Cole Bennett. Is he available?" "He's in the barn," Evelyn said, very aware of her own stained apron and the fact that she hadn't washed her hair in 3 days. "Can I ask what this is about?" "I'm Vivian Mercer. The town council sent me to discuss a business proposition with Mr. Bennett." Every instinct, Evelyn had started screaming warnings, but she forced herself to stay calm. "I'll get him." She found Cole mucking out stalls covered in sweat and dirt and told him about the visitor. He looked confused, then annoyed, then resigned. "Guess we better see what they want now," he muttered, stabbing the pitchfork into a hay bale. They walked back to the house together. Vivian Mercer was still standing by her carriage, looking around the ranch with an expression that was hard to read. When she saw Cole, her smile widened. "Mr. Bennett, thank you for seeing me. Didn't have much choice. You're already here." Cole crossed his arms. "What does the town council want?" "May we speak inside? This is a rather delicate matter." Cole glanced at Evelyn, who shrugged. They went into the house, and Vivian settled herself at the table like she owned it, smoothing her skirts with practiced grace. The twins were napping in their crib, and Evelyn positioned herself between Vivian and the babies without quite meaning to. "I'll be direct," Vivian said. "The town council is concerned about your situation. They sent me to offer you a solution." "What kind of solution?" "A practical one." Vivian folded her hands on the table. "I'm a widow myself, lost my husband 2 years ago. I have means, education, and I'm well respected in the community. The council believes that if you and I were to marry, it would solve several problems at once. You'd regain access to trade, I'd have a home and family again, and your sons would have a proper mother." The silence that followed was so thick Evelyn could barely breathe through it. Cole stared at Vivian like she'd just suggested he cut off his own arm. "You want me to marry you? It makes sense, doesn't it? You need help. I can provide it. Your boys need stability. I can give them that. And you'd be welcome back into the community with open arms. Everyone wins. Except her." Cole jerked his head toward Evelyn. Vivian's smile thinned. "Miss Hart would be free to return to her family. I'm sure her sister misses her terribly. Her sister threw her out. All the more reason for a fresh start." Vivian's voice stayed pleasant, but there was steel underneath. "I'm not here to cause trouble, Mr. Bennett. I'm here to offer you a way forward that doesn't involve starving on principle." "I'm not interested." "Perhaps you should think about it before deciding. I don't mean to be indelicate, but your current arrangement is unconventional. It's hurting your reputation, your business, your children's future. Whereas a marriage to me would restore all of that overnight." Cole stood up. "I appreciate you coming all the way out here, Mrs. Mercer, but the answer's no. I'm not marrying someone I don't know to make the town council happy." "Not even for your sons?" The question hit like a punch. Cole's jaw tightened. "My sons are fine." "Are they?" Vivian looked pointedly around the cabin, at the worn furniture, the empty cupboards that Evelyn hadn't had time to restock, the general air of barely holding together that hung over everything. "Because from where I'm sitting, they're growing up in poverty when they don't have to. You're a proud man, Mr. Bennett. I respect that, But pride doesn't feed children. Evelyn watched Cole's face and saw something terrible happen. He didn't agree with Vivian. She could see that. But for just a second, just one horrible, flickering second, he hesitated. That hesitation cut through Evelyn like a knife. Vivian saw it too. Her smile returned, warmer now, almost sympathetic. I'll leave you to think about it. Take a few days. Consider what's best for everyone involved. She stood up, smoothing her skirts again. I'm staying at the hotel in town if you want to discuss this further. She left in a swirl of expensive fabric and subtle perfume, and the cabin felt smaller after she was gone. Cole stood by the window, watching the carriage disappear down the road. He didn't look at Evelyn. Cole, city. Oh, don't. You're actually considering it. I said don't. She's right, though, isn't she? Evelyn's voice came out steadier than she felt. About the boys, about what they need, about what you can't give them as long as I'm here. Cole finally turned around. That's not what It's fine. I get it. I'm not your wife. I'm not their mother. I'm just someone who showed up and made everything more complicated. That's not true. Then what is true? Evelyn heard her voice rising and couldn't stop it. Because from where I'm standing, you've got a choice between a woman who can give you everything back and a woman who's cost you everything. That's not complicated math. Stop it. Why? You're the one who hesitated. The accusation hung between them like smoke. Cole's face went hard. I hesitated because I'm trying to keep my sons alive. Because every decision I make affects whether they eat or starve, whether we keep this ranch or lose everything. So yeah, for 1 second I thought about whether accepting her offer might be the smart thing to do. That make me a terrible person? It makes you practical. I don't want to be practical. He stopped himself, fists clenched. What? What do you want? But Cole didn't answer. He grabbed his hat and walked out, letting the door slam behind him. Evelyn stood alone in the cabin with the sleeping twins and the crushing realization that she'd been fooling herself. She'd thought this was becoming something real. Thought the way Cole looked at her meant something beyond gratitude. Thought maybe, possibly, they were building toward a future that included both of them. But she was just the help, the temporary solution until a better one came along. And now a better one had arrived in a blue traveling suit with an offer Cole couldn't afford to refuse. Evelyn barely slept that night. She lay in the small room Cole had given her when she'd first arrived, staring at the ceiling, listening to the twins breathe in their crib. She'd moved them into her room weeks ago when Daniel started having nightmares and only calmed down when he could hear her heartbeat. Now they felt like hers in a way that was going to destroy her when she left. Because she was leaving. She'd known that the second Vivian Mercer walked through the door, this was always temporary. She'd just forgotten that temporary had an expiration date. Cole didn't come to breakfast. Evelyn fed the twins alone, changed them, settled them in the basket she carried everywhere, and went about her morning chores like she did every day. But everything felt hollow now, like she was going through motions in a life that didn't belong to her anymore. She found him in the barn around midday, fixing a bridle that didn't need fixing. We need to talk, she said. I know. I'm leaving. Cole's hands stopped moving. What? You heard me. I'm leaving. Tomorrow morning, if I can get a horse. Evelyn, don't. She held up a hand. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. You need to do what's best for your sons. I understand that. And what's best is marrying someone who can actually help you instead of making everything worse. You don't make things worse. I cost you your entire livelihood, Cole. The town blacklisted you because of me. Your boys are going hungry because I'm here. So yeah, I make things worse. She kept her voice steady through sheer force of will. Mrs. Mercer can give you everything back. Let her. I don't want her. But you need her. That's what matters. Cole threw the bridle across the barn. Stop telling me what I need. Then stop being too stubborn to see it, Evelyn shouted back. I'm trying to make this easy for you. Easy? You think any of this is easy? He crossed the space between them in 3 strides. You think I want to marry some stranger just to get the town off my back? You think I want to stand there and watch you leave? Then give me a reason to stay. The words came out before she could stop them. They hung in the air, raw and desperate and completely exposing. Cole stared at her, breathing hard, close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his brown eyes. "I can't give you what you deserve," he said quietly. "I'm broke. I'm blacklisted. I've got 2 babies and a failing ranch and enough enemies to fill a saloon. You could do better than that." "I don't want better. I want—" Evelyn stopped herself, but it was too late. She'd already said too much. "What do you want?" She looked at him, at this stubborn, broken, impossible man who'd let her into his life when everyone else had turned their backs, and felt everything she'd been trying not to feel come crashing down at once. "I want to matter to someone for more than what I can do for them," she whispered. "I want to wake up and have it mean something that I'm here. I want—" Her voice broke. "I want you to choose me, not because I'm useful, not because there's no one else, but because you actually want me to stay." Cole's face did something complicated. "Evelyn, but you can't say that, can you? Because I'm not what you need. I'm just what you had when there was nothing else." She turned to leave, but Cole caught her wrist. "That's not true." "Then what is?" He pulled her back around, and suddenly they were so close she could feel the heat coming off him, could see the way his chest was rising and falling like he'd been running. "The truth is, I don't know how to do this," he said roughly. "I don't know how to want someone again after losing someone. I don't know how to look at you and not feel guilty that I'm even thinking about a future when Caroline's barely cold in the ground. But I do think about it. Every day I think about it. About you staying. About this becoming permanent. About—" He stopped, jaw clenched. "About what?" "About all of it, the whole damn thing." Evelyn's heart was hammering so hard she could barely hear her own thoughts. "Cole, but I can't ask you to stay when I've got nothing to offer. When marrying Vivian Mercer would fix everything and give the boys the life they deserve. That would be selfish. Since when do you care about being selfish? Since it started affecting you." The admission hung between them, honest and painful and completely unexpected. Evelyn looked up at him, at this man who'd been fighting the whole world for months just to keep his family alive, and felt something crack open in her chest. "What if I don't care what you can offer?" she said softly. "What if I just want to be here anyway?" Cole's grip on her wrist tightened. "Then you're crazier than I thought." "Probably." They stood there, neither of them moving, both of them on the edge of something that felt like falling and flying at the same time. Then one of the twins started crying from the house, and the moment shattered. Cole let go of her wrist. Evelyn stepped back. They looked at each other across the dusty barn floor, and everything that hadn't been said sat heavy in the air between them. "I should—" Evelyn gestured toward the house. "Yeah." She left him standing there and went to take care of the twins, and tried not to think about how wrong it felt to be walking away. She packed that night after Cole had gone to bed. Not much, because she still didn't own much, but enough that she could leave without having to come back. One dress. The coat. A few things she'd need for the road. She'd take the twins to Cole's room before she left. Make sure they were settled. Write a note with instructions on feeding times and how to handle Daniel when he got fussy and what song James liked best when he couldn't sleep. And then she'd go. Before the sun came up. Before Cole could stop her or she could talk herself out of it. It was the right thing to do. She knew that. Cole needed to marry Vivian Mercer, needed to get his life back, needed to stop sacrificing everything for a woman who'd shown up broken and desperate and had never really belonged here anyway. Evelyn sat on the edge of the bed and looked around the room that had been hers for almost 3 months. It wasn't much. Just 4 walls and a window and a crib that creaked when the twins moved, but it had felt like home in a way nothing had since her parents died. She was going to miss it. She was going to miss everything. One of the twins, James, she thought, made a soft sound in his sleep. Evelyn got up and looked down at them. These 2 boys who'd saved her just as much as she'd saved them. They were getting so big, growing so fast. In a few months they'd be crawling. In a year they'd be walking, learning to talk, becoming whole people. She wouldn't be there to see any of it. The thought hurt worse than anything. Evelyn reached down and touched James's hand, feeling his tiny fingers curl around hers in his sleep. Daniel shifted, making a small grumpy sound, and she smiled despite everything. "You boys are going to be fine," she whispered. "Your daddy loves you, and he's going to find someone who can take care of you better than I ever could." It was a lie. She knew it was a lie. But she told it anyway because the truth, that leaving was going to rip her apart, wasn't something she could say out loud. She pulled her hand back gently and went to her packed bag, trying to figure out how early she needed to leave to avoid running into Cole. She didn't sleep, just sat by the window watching the sky slowly lighten, waiting for the moment when she could disappear without having to explain herself. But when dawn finally broke and Evelyn carried her bag out to the main room, Cole was already awake. He was sitting at the table, 2 cups of coffee in front of him, still wearing yesterday's shirt. He looked up when she walked in, saw the bag in her hand, and his face went carefully blank. "So you're actually doing this?" Evelyn set the bag down. "It's the right thing." "For who?" "For everyone." "That's not an answer." She sat down across from him, taking the coffee he pushed toward her even though her hands were shaking too much to hold it steady. "Cole, we've been over this. You need to—" "I talked to Vivian Mercer last night," he interrupted. "Rode into town after you went to bed. Told her thanks, but no thanks." Evelyn's heart stopped. "What?" "I turned her down. Told her I appreciated the offer, but I wasn't interested in marrying someone just to make the town council happy." "Cole, you can't—" "I also told her that if the council wanted to keep playing games, they could go right ahead, but I wasn't playing anymore. I'd find buyers somewhere else, build my own trade routes, do whatever it took. But I wasn't giving in." "That's insane. You'll lose everything." "Maybe. Probably." He met her eyes. "But I'd lose more if I let you leave." Evelyn stared at him, unable to process what she was hearing. "You're choosing me over the ranch? Over getting your life back? I'm choosing what matters." Cole's voice was steady. "And you matter. More than the ranch. More than the town's approval. More than any of it. But the boys need you. Not some stranger who showed up with money and good intentions. They need you." He reached across the table and took her hand the same way he had that night Daniel got sick. "I need you." "You hesitated," Evelyn whispered. "When Vivian made her offer, you hesitated." "Yeah, I did. Because for 1 second I thought maybe she was right. Maybe I was being selfish, keeping you here when you deserved better. But then I realized something." He squeezed her hand. "I don't want better. I just want you. And if that makes me selfish, then I guess I'm selfish." Evelyn felt tears start running down her face before she could stop them. "You're an idiot." "I know. We're going to lose everything. Probably. The town's going to hate us. They already do." She laughed, which came out more like a sob, and Cole smiled, really smiled, for the first time in what felt like forever. "So you're staying?" he asked. Evelyn looked at him, at this impossible, stubborn, somehow wonderful man who'd just thrown away his chance at stability because he couldn't stand to lose her, and felt something settle in her chest that felt almost like peace. "I'm staying." "Good." He stood up, pulling her with him, and before Evelyn could figure out what was happening, Cole was kissing her. It wasn't gentle, wasn't careful. It was desperate and messy, and tasted like coffee, and felt like falling and catching yourself at the same time. Evelyn's hands came up to grip his shirt, and Cole's arms wrapped around her like he was afraid she might disappear if he let go. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Evelyn could hear the twins starting to wake up in the other room. "We should," she started. "Yeah." But neither of them moved. They just stood there, foreheads pressed together, holding on to each other like they'd finally found something solid in a world that kept trying to knock them down. "What happens now?" Evelyn asked. "I don't know, but we'll figure it out." "Together?" "Together." The twins started crying in earnest, both of them demanding attention with the kind of volume only babies could manage. Evelyn pulled back, wiping her eyes, and Cole let her go reluctantly. "I'll get them," he said. "I'll make breakfast." They moved around each other in the small cabin, settling into the rhythm they'd built over months of living in close quarters. But everything felt different now, lighter somehow, despite all the problems that still existed. Evelyn was cracking eggs into a pan when she heard horses outside. A lot of horses. Cole heard them too. He looked at her, twins in his arms, and something grim settled over his face. "Stay inside," he said. "Cole, please, just stay inside with the boys." He handed her the twins and went outside, and Evelyn's heart dropped when she heard the voices through the door. Robert Finch, Pastor Monroe, and half a dozen other men from town. "Bennett,
Robert's voice carried clear through the morning air. "We need to talk." Evelyn put the twins in their basket and moved to the window, staying out of sight but close enough to see. Cole stood on the porch, arms crossed, facing down 8 men on horseback. "About what?" "About your answer to Mrs. Mercer's very generous offer." Robert's horse stamped, sensing his rider's anger. "She came back to town mighty upset last night. Said you turned her down flat." "That's right."
You got any idea what you just threw away?
"A life I don't want with a woman I don't know."
Yeah, I'm real clear on what I threw away.
"You're choosing poverty over prosperity, scandal over respect, that heart woman over your own children's future. I'm choosing what's right for my family, and that's none of your business."
It becomes our business when you're making a mockery of decent society. Robert climbed down from his horse, and the other men followed. "We came out here to give you one last chance, Bennett. Send her away, marry Mrs. Mercer, and we'll welcome you back. Keep being stubborn, and we'll make sure you never do business in this territory again. You already tried that, didn't work. We can do worse." It was a threat, clear and simple. Cole's hands curled into fists. "Get off my land. We'll leave when you see reason." "I said get off my land." Robert took a step forward. "Or what? You'll fight all of us? You'll drag us off? Face it, Bennett. You've got no leverage here, no power, no friends, just a failing ranch, and a woman who's ruined your life." That's when Evelyn made her decision. She picked up both twins, settled them in her arms, and walked outside. Every man turned to look at her. Cole's face went pale. "Evelyn, go back inside." "No." She walked up next to him, twins against her chest, and looked Robert Finch dead in the eye. "You want to talk about ruining lives? Let's talk about it. I came here because your town, your people, decided 2 babies deserved to die because you didn't like their father. I rode through a blizzard to save them because not one of you would lift a finger to help. And now you want to stand there and tell me I'm the problem?" "You're living in sin," Pastor Monroe said quietly. "Making a mockery of marriage, and I'm keeping 2 children alive, that's all. And if that offends your sense of morality more than letting them starve would have, then your morality's broken, not mine." Robert's face was red. "You don't get to lecture us about—" "I'm not lecturing. I'm telling you the truth. You drove me here. Every single one of you. You threw me out, called me cursed, treated me like I was worthless because my baby died. So I found somewhere I could be useful, and now you can't stand it because it doesn't fit your idea of how things should be. It's not proper, Ikiru." "Proper?" Evelyn laughed, and it was bitter. "You want to talk about proper? Where was proper when I was scrubbing floors for my sister and her husband wouldn't look me in the eye? Where was proper when these boys were dying and no one cared? You don't care about proper. You care about control. And you're angry because you can't control this." The men shifted uncomfortably. Cole was staring at her like he'd never seen her before. "We're trying to help," Pastor Monroe tried again. "No, you're not. You're trying to punish us for not doing what you want. But here's the thing." Evelyn shifted the twins in her arms. "We don't need your help. We don't need your approval. We just need you to leave us alone." "That's not how this works," Robert said. "Then make it work differently." Cole stepped forward, putting himself slightly in front of Evelyn. "You heard her. Now get off my land or I swear I'll start shooting." For a long moment nobody moved. Then Robert spat in the dirt and climbed back on his horse. "You're making a mistake," he said. "Won't be the first time," Cole shot back. The men rode off, and Evelyn and Cole stood together on the porch, watching them disappear down the road. The twins were quiet in Evelyn's arms, like they sensed something important had just happened. "You didn't have to do that," Cole said quietly. "Yes, I did. You made enemies of all of them. I already had enemies. At least now they know I'm not backing down." Cole looked at her, something fierce and proud in his face. "You're something else, you know that?" "Is that a compliment?" Yeah, it is." They went back inside, and Evelyn fed the twins while Cole burned the eggs she'd started earlier. They ate in comfortable silence, both of them too tired to talk, but neither wanting to be anywhere else. The battle wasn't over. They both knew that. The town would keep pushing. Money would keep running out. Winter would come again, and they'd have to figure out how to survive it. But right now, in this moment, they had each other. And somehow, that felt like enough. The retaliation came fast and mean. 3 days after Evelyn's confrontation with the town council, Cole rode out to check the fence line and found 20 posts cut down, the wire trampled into the mud. Someone had driven cattle through deliberately, destroying hours of work and letting his own small herd scatter across the ridge. He came back to the cabin white-faced with rage, but Evelyn saw something else underneath it: fear. "How bad?" she asked. "Bad enough. I'll need a week to fix it, maybe more. And I don't have the supplies to replace all that wire." "Can you patch it?" "Maybe. But whoever did this is sending a message." He threw his hat on the table. "They're not just trying to starve us out anymore. They're trying to break us." Evelyn looked at the twins, both of them crawling around on a blanket she'd spread on the floor. James was trying to eat his own foot. Daniel was babbling at nothing, making sounds that almost resembled words. They had no idea their world was falling apart. "What do we do?" she asked quietly. "We fix the fence. We keep going." Cole's jaw was set in that stubborn line she knew too well. "What else can we do?" So they kept going. Cole spent dawn to dusk rebuilding the fence line while Evelyn managed everything else: the twins, the house, the garden she'd started in a desperate attempt to grow something they could eat. Her hands were raw from work, her back ached constantly, and she was so tired she sometimes forgot what day it was. But she didn't complain. Complaining felt like admitting defeat, and she wasn't ready to do that yet. The town escalated again 2 weeks later. Cole's credit, what little he'd had left, got revoked at every trading post within a 3-day ride. Someone spread rumors that his cattle were diseased, scaring off the few buyers who'd still been willing to deal with him. Then the supply routes got reorganized, so that shipments heading to settlements near the Bennett Ranch somehow never made it through. They were being systematically cut off from everything. "This is Robert," Cole said one night, pacing the cabin floor while Evelyn tried to get Daniel to sleep. "Has to be. He's got enough connections to pull something like this. Why does he care this much? I'm his wife's sister, not his problem." "You made him look bad, stood up to him in front of the whole council and called out their hypocrisy. Men like Robert can't handle that. They'd rather destroy you than admit they were wrong." Evelyn shifted Daniel to her other shoulder, patting his back in slow circles. "So what's the plan?" "I don't know. I've been trying to figure out how to get supplies without going through the trading posts, but everything's tied up in routes Robert controls or influences. It's like he's got the whole territory sewn up tight. There has to be another way. If there is, I haven't found it yet." The defeat in his voice scared her more than anything else. Cole was a fighter, always had been. But everyone had a breaking point, and Evelyn could see him getting close to his. She put Daniel down in the crib, finally asleep, and walked over to where Cole stood by the window. Without thinking about it, she put her hand on his arm. "We'll figure it out," she said. "You keep saying that. Because it's true. We've made it this far. We'll make it through this too." Cole turned to look at her, and in the dim firelight, his face looked older than it should, worn down by months of fighting battles on every front. "What if we don't?" he asked quietly. "What if we lose everything? The ranch, the cattle, all of it. Then we start over somewhere else. With what money? What resources?" "With each other." Evelyn met his eyes. "That's more than a lot of people have." Cole stared at her for a long moment, then pulled her into his arms without warning. She went stiff with surprise, then relaxed against him, feeling the solid warmth of his chest and the way his heart was beating too fast. "I don't deserve you," he said into her hair. "Good thing I'm not here because you deserve me." He laughed, rough and tired, and held her tighter. They stood like that until the fire burned low and the night got cold enough that they had to separate or freeze. The idea came to Evelyn 3 days later while she was washing clothes in the stream behind the house. She'd been thinking about the women she'd known in town, the ones who'd whispered about her, sure, but also the ones who'd looked at her with something that might have been envy. Women stuck in bad marriages, women with too many kids and not enough help, women who'd tried to speak up and been shut down, women like her. What if she could give them somewhere to go? The thought was absurd at first. The ranch was barely holding together. They couldn't even feed themselves properly, let alone take on more people. But the more Evelyn turned it over in her mind, the more it made a kind of desperate sense. She mentioned it to Cole that night after the twins were down. What if we stopped trying to make peace with the town and started building something they couldn't control? Cole looked up from the harness he was mending. What do you mean? I mean, we turn this place into somewhere people can come when they've got nowhere else to go. Women, mostly. The ones the town doesn't care about. Widows, abandoned mothers, girls who got pregnant and got thrown out. We give them work, shelter, a place where they don't have to apologize for existing. Evelyn, we can barely...
I know we're broke and blacklisted and barely surviving, but think about it.
More hands means more work gets done. We could grow more food, raise more animals, build more. And every person who comes here is someone the town can't use against us anymore. Cole set down the harness. You're talking about starting a whole community. I'm talking about fighting back. Not with fists or guns, but by building something they can't destroy. Something that proves we don't need their approval to survive. That's ambitious. It's insane, Evelyn admitted. But so is everything else we've done. At least this way we'd be doing something instead of just waiting for them to crush us. Cole was quiet for a long time, staring into the fire. Then he looked at her with something that might have been hope. You really think we could pull this off? I think we have to try. Because doing nothing means they win. And I'm not ready to let them win. A slow smile spread across Cole's face. All right then, let's build something they can't ignore. Back. The first woman arrived 2 weeks later. Her name was Sarah Winters, and she showed up on foot with 2 small children clinging to her skirts and bruises on her face that were trying to heal. She'd heard about the Bennett Ranch through whispers in the market, heard that there was a woman there who'd told off the town council and survived, who'd built a life where the rules said there couldn't be one. Evelyn found her standing at the edge of the property, looking terrified and hopeful in equal measure. I heard you take people in, Sarah said. Her voice shook. People who don't have anywhere else. Evelyn looked at her, at the 2 children who couldn't have been more than 3 and 5, at the way Sarah held herself like she was ready to run at the first sign of trouble. We're not a charity, Evelyn said carefully. If you stay, you work. We all pull our weight here. I can work. I'm good with animals, and I can cook, clean, whatever you need. Just please. My husband drinks, and when he drinks, he gets mean, and I can't go back there. Evelyn made the decision in about 3 seconds. Come on inside. We'll figure out the details. Sarah's face crumpled with relief. She followed Evelyn into the cabin, children in tow, and that was how it started. Cole was skeptical at first. 1 more mouth to feed, he said. 3, counting the kids. They didn't have resources for this. But Sarah proved her worth within a week. She could butcher a chicken faster than anyone Evelyn had ever seen, knew how to preserve food with next to nothing, and had a way with the horses that made even the ornery ones calm down. Her children were quiet and well-behaved, probably from necessity more than nature, and they played with the twins like they'd been waiting their whole lives for friends. The second woman came a month later. Then a third. Word spread through channels Evelyn hadn't even known existed. Networks of women helping women, whispered conversations in back rooms and markets, letters passed hand to hand. The Bennett Ranch became known as the place you could go when everything else had failed. By late summer, they had 7 women living on the property, plus a dozen children of various ages. Cole built additional housing using lumber he traded for in settlements that didn't care about the blacklist. The women worked in shifts, cooking, cleaning, tending the expanded garden, caring for livestock, watching the children. What they built wasn't comfortable, wasn't easy, but it was functional. And more importantly, it was theirs. The town noticed, of course. You're running some kind of refuge now? Robert Finch demanded when he showed up uninvited one afternoon. Collecting every broken woman in the valley? I'm giving people a place to work, Evelyn said calmly. She was hanging laundry with Sarah and another woman named Beth, the 3 of them moving in practiced rhythm. Nothing illegal about that. It's improper. All these women living here without husbands, without permission from men like you? Evelyn cut him off. Yeah, that's kind of the point. Robert's face went red. You're creating a scandal. No, I'm creating a solution. You're the ones who made it necessary. He left in a fury, and Evelyn knew it wasn't over. The town couldn't ignore them anymore. They'd become too visible, too organized, too much of a challenge to the way things had always been done. The next escalation came swift and brutal. Someone, no one could prove who, started a fire in the barn one night in early September. Cole and 2 of the women managed to get the animals out before the whole structure went up, but they lost most of their winter feed, and all the equipment Cole had stored inside. Evelyn stood watching the barn burn, twins in her arms, and felt rage settle cold and hard in her chest. "They're trying to kill us," Sarah said quietly beside her. "They're trying to scare us," Evelyn corrected. "There's a difference." "Is there?" "Yeah, because we're not leaving." Cole came over, covered in soot and ash, smelling like smoke. "We can rebuild." "It'll take time, but—" "No," Evelyn interrupted. "We're not just rebuilding, we're expanding." He stared at her. "Evelyn, we just lost—" "I know what we lost. But if we just replace what burned, we're playing defense. I'm done playing defense." She looked at the women gathered around, watching their shelter burn. "We're going to build bigger, better. Make this place so strong they can't touch it. With what resources? We'll find them. We'll trade, barter, do whatever we have to. But we're not backing down. Not now." Sarah stepped forward. "My brother works in timber 2 territories over. He owes me a favor. I can write to him, see if he'll send supplies." Beth, another widow who'd arrived with nothing but the clothes on her back, spoke up. "I've got family in the mining camps. They might be willing to trade." One by one, the women started offering connections, resources, ideas, things they'd held back because they hadn't thought they mattered. Cole looked at Evelyn over the firelight, and she saw understanding dawn in his face. This wasn't just about them anymore. It had grown into something bigger. "All right," he said. "Let's build something they can't burn down." Us. They worked through September like people possessed. Cole drew up plans for a new barn, bigger than the old one, with a loft for storage and reinforced walls. The women organized themselves into crews: construction, cooking, childcare, livestock management. Even the older children helped, running messages and fetching tools. Supplies came in from unexpected places. Sarah's brother sent lumber. Beth's mining camp connections traded materials for preserved food the women had put up. A sympathetic trader 2 settlements over started routing goods to them under the table, charging fair prices because his own daughter had run from a bad marriage, and he understood what the ranch represented. The town council tried to shut down the supply lines, but they couldn't control everything. For every route they blocked, the women found 2 more. For every obstacle Robert Finch threw up, someone found a way around it. It became a game, a war fought with logistics and determination instead of guns. By October, the new barn was up and better than the old one. They'd expanded the garden into a full working farm, added chicken coops and a smokehouse, built 2 new bunkhouses for the growing number of women who kept arriving. The ranch was transforming into a real settlement, and the town couldn't ignore it anymore. Pastor Monroe came out to talk, looking uncomfortable and earnest in that way men did when they were trying to fix something they'd helped break. "Evelyn, I'm not here to cause trouble," he said. "I'm just worried about what you're building here. This many unmarried women living together, raising children without fathers present, it sets a dangerous precedent." "Dangerous for who?" Evelyn was cleaning fresh vegetables, hands covered in dirt. "These women were starving, getting beaten, thrown out with nowhere to go. We gave them somewhere. How is that dangerous?" "It undermines the natural order of things, the family structure, marriage. Women need to eat, need shelter, need to be safe. Everything else is luxury. But without proper male guidance, these women survived without proper male guidance before they got here. Some of them survived because they got away from it. So unless you're offering something useful, I've got work to do." Pastor Monroe left looking frustrated, and Evelyn went back to her vegetables. One of the women, Lucy, who'd arrived pregnant and alone, sat down next to her. "You think they'll ever leave us alone?" Lucy asked. "No, but I think eventually they'll realize they can't control us, and that's close enough." The first snow came in November, earlier than expected and heavier than anyone wanted. Cole worried they wouldn't have enough food stored, but the women had been preparing since summer. Root cellars full of vegetables, smoked meat hanging in the new barn, preserved fruits and pickled everything. They'd learned the hard way that winter didn't care about good intentions, so they'd prepared like their lives depended on it. The snow kept falling. By December, the path to town was nearly impassable. They were cut off, isolated, completely on their own. And somehow, they were fine. The women organized school lessons for the children, teaching them to read and write and do basic numbers. They held communal meals where everyone contributed something. They created a rotation for childcare so mothers could sleep through the night for once. The Bennett Ranch had become more than a refuge. It had become a family. Evelyn watched it happen with something like awe. She'd imagined giving women a place to stay, but she hadn't imagined this. The laughter, the camaraderie, the way they all looked out for each other, the way the children ran wild and happy instead of scared and silent. "You did this," Cole said one night. They were sitting by the fire after everyone else had gone to bed, the twins asleep between them. "You built this whole thing." "We built it," Evelyn corrected. "All of us. You started it. That matters." She leaned her head on his shoulder, tired in the best way. "Think we'll make it through winter?" "If we don't freeze or starve, yeah. That's not encouraging. It's honest." Evelyn smiled despite herself. "When did you get wise?" "About 3 disasters ago. I'm a slow learner." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the fire burn low. Outside, the snow kept falling. The world was buried in white, cold and harsh and unforgiving. But inside there was warmth, safety, something that felt almost like peace. Then, 2 days before Christmas, everything changed. The messenger arrived half frozen, barely able to stand. He'd ridden from the town through weather that should have killed him, and he collapsed in the snow outside the main house before anyone saw him. Sarah found him and dragged him inside, shouting for help. Evelyn came running with blankets while Cole built up the fire. "Town!" the man gasped through chattering teeth. "Supplies! Running out! Food shortage! People dying!" Cole and Evelyn exchanged looks. "What happened?" Cole demanded. "Supply wagons. Couldn't get through. Mountain Pass collapsed. Last shipment was 6 weeks ago. We're starving." The irony was almost funny. The town that had tried to starve them was now starving itself. "Why come here?" Evelyn asked. The messenger looked at her with desperate eyes. "Because you're the only ones with supplies left. The council voted. They're asking for help. Please." The cabin went silent. Every woman there understood what was happening. The same people who'd called them shameful, who'd destroyed their barn, who'd tried everything to crush them. Those people were now begging for mercy. "No," Sarah said immediately. "Absolutely not. Let them starve the way they wanted us to." Several other women murmured agreement. But Evelyn was looking at Cole, and Cole was looking back at her, and she could see him thinking the same thing she was. "How many people?" Evelyn asked. "Whole town. Maybe 300. Women, children, families. The council made the mess, but everyone's paying for it." "How much food do they need?" "Evelyn, no," Beth cut in. "They don't deserve our help." "I didn't ask if they deserved it. I asked how much they need." The messenger gave her numbers. It was bad. Worse than bad. The town needed enough supplies to last until the pass cleared, which could be weeks or months depending on the weather. "We could do it," Cole said quietly. "It'd hurt, but we'd have enough left to make it through if we're careful." "That's insane," Lucy protested. "They tried to destroy us." "They did destroy us," Evelyn agreed. "Over and over. They took everything they could, said terrible things, turned the whole valley against us. I remember all of it." "Then why are you even considering this?" Evelyn looked around at the women gathered in her cabin. Women who'd come here broken and desperate, who'd found strength in each other, who'd built something real out of nothing. "Because we're not them," she said simply. "We don't let people starve because we don't like them. We're better than that. We have to be, or what's the point of any of this?" The room erupted into argument. Half the women wanted to tell the town to handle their own problems. The other half looked torn, understanding Evelyn's point, but hating it. Cole let them argue for a while, then held up his hand for silence. "This is Evelyn's call," he said. "She started this place. She built this community. Whatever she decides, we follow." All eyes turned to Evelyn. She thought about her daughter, buried in frozen ground. About the night she'd ridden through a blizzard to save 2 babies everyone had given up on. About every woman in this room who'd been thrown away and found her way here. She thought about Robert Finch and Pastor Monroe and every person who'd tried to break her. And then she thought about the children in town who had nothing to do with any of this. The mothers trying to keep their babies alive. The people who were just caught in the middle. "We help them," she said. "Not because they deserve it. Because we're not the kind of people who let children starve." Sarah shook her head. "You're too good, Evelyn. It's going to get you killed someday." "Maybe. But I'll die knowing I tried to be decent. That's more than most people can say."
The decision made, they moved fast. Cole organized teams to load wagons with food and supplies. The women packed carefully, making sure to leave enough for themselves while giving as much as they could spare. Children helped carry bags and boxes, everyone working together. By dawn, 3 wagons were ready to go. "I'm coming with you," Evelyn said to Cole. "No, stay here where it's safe." "Safe? We just gave away half our winter stores. If something goes wrong and you don't come back, I need to be there to speak for us." Cole started to argue, then stopped. He knew that look on her face. "Fine, but the twins stay here." Agreed. They left the twins with Sarah, who promised to protect them like they were her own. Then Evelyn climbed onto the wagon seat next to Cole, bundled in every piece of warm clothing she owned, and they headed toward town. The journey took 6 hours through snow that came up to the horses' knees. By the time they reached the settlement, Evelyn was so cold she couldn't feel her feet. The town was worse than she'd imagined. People looked gaunt, desperate. Children cried from hunger. The stores were empty, windows dark. Word spread fast that the Bennett wagons were there. People came out of their houses, staring in disbelief. Robert Finch emerged from the council building, and Evelyn saw something in his face she'd never seen before. Shame. "You came," he said. "We came," Evelyn agreed. "Where do you want the supplies?" "Evelyn, we..." He stopped, jaw working. "We don't deserve this." "No, you don't. But your children do. Your elderly do. The people who had nothing to do with trying to destroy us do." She climbed down from the wagon, every muscle protesting. "So are you going to stand there feeling guilty, or are you going to help us unload?" They worked through the afternoon, distributing food according to need. Families with small children got priority. Elderly folks who couldn't fend for themselves got extra. Everyone else got enough to survive until the pass cleared. Pastor Monroe approached Evelyn while she was handing out preserved vegetables. "I misjudged you," he said quietly. "Completely. I believed you were leading people astray. But this..." He gestured at the organized distribution, the way the women from the ranch were helping without judgment. "This is what we should have been doing all along." "Yeah," Evelyn said, "it is. Is there a way to make amends? You can start by leaving us alone. Let us build what we're building without interference. Stop trying to control how people live. And if we need help again, then ask. Like decent people instead of bullies." She handed him a bag of dried beans. "And maybe remember that the people you threw away are the ones who saved you." News spread through the valley like wildfire. The Bennett Ranch had saved the town that tried to destroy them. Evelyn Hart, the cursed woman everyone had written off, had shown more mercy than the whole council combined. The shift wasn't immediate, but it was real. Farmers who'd refused to trade started showing up with offers. Merchants apologized and asked to do business. Families sent letters thanking them, some including small gifts they couldn't afford but gave anyway. The town still wasn't perfect. There were still people who muttered about propriety and scandal, but they muttered quietly now because everyone knew what the ranch represented, and everyone knew who'd saved them when they were starving. When Evelyn and Cole finally made it back to the ranch 3 days later, exhausted and half frozen, they found the women waiting with hot food and worried faces. "How'd it go?" Sarah asked. Evelyn collapsed into a chair. "We didn't get killed, so better than expected." "They say thank you?" "Some of them. The rest looked like it physically hurt to admit they needed us." "Good," Beth said with satisfaction. "Hope it hurt a lot." The children came running, the twins crawling as fast as they could toward Evelyn. She scooped them up, one in each arm, and felt something loosen in her chest. They were fine. Everyone was fine. They'd survived another disaster. Cole sat down next to her, looking as exhausted as she felt. "We're out of food for ourselves now. Gave away more than we should have." "I know. We might not make it through winter." "We'll make it." "How?" Evelyn looked around at the women and children filling the cabin, at the community they'd built from nothing, at these 2 boys in her arms who'd started everything. "Same way we always do. Together." Cole smiled tiredly. "You know you're terrifying when you're optimistic, right?" "I've been told." Outside, the snow kept falling, but inside, surrounded by people who'd chosen to stand together against a world that wanted them broken, Evelyn felt something she hadn't felt in months. She felt like they might actually win this.
They made it through winter on stubbornness and the goodwill they'd earned saving the town. Farmers started showing up with grain they could spare. Merchants extended credit. Even Robert Finch, looking like every word cost him something, rode out to offer use of his surplus hay for the ranch's livestock. "Don't need your charity," Cole said when Robert arrived. "It's not charity. It's payment for what you did." Robert wouldn't meet his eyes. "My youngest daughter would have starved if you hadn't brought those supplies. So take the hay. Consider us even." He left before Cole could argue further. Evelyn watched from the porch, twins balanced on her hips. James was pulling her hair. Daniel was trying to eat her collar. Both of them had gotten big enough that carrying them together made her back ache, but she wasn't ready to put them down yet. That had to hurt his pride, she said when Cole came back. "Good. Maybe it'll teach him something." "You think people actually learn?" Cole looked at her, then at the settlement spreading around them. The new buildings, the women working in organized shifts, the children running between houses like they owned the place. "I think some people do, when they don't have a choice." The town's gratitude translated into something more valuable than thanks. Trade routes opened back up. The blacklist dissolved like it had never existed. Store owners who'd refused to sell them supplies started seeking them out with deals. It was pragmatic more than genuine, but Evelyn would take pragmatic. Pragmatic kept people fed. By February, the ranch had more residents than it had space for. Women kept arriving, some from the local valley, others from territories so far away Evelyn had to look them up on Cole's battered map. They came because word had spread about the place where unwanted women could build new lives, where children could run without fear, where the rules were simple: work hard, pull your weight, and nobody asked about your past. "We need more housing," Cole said one night, looking at the numbers Evelyn had started keeping. She'd never been good at figures, but necessity made her learn fast. "At this rate, we'll have 50 people here by spring." "Can we support 50? If we expand the farmland, add more livestock, maybe trade more aggressively with the settlements that are friendly now." He ran a hand through his hair. "It's possible, but it'll be tight." "When hasn't it been tight?" "Fair point." They built through the spring thaw. Cole designed a third bunkhouse, this one big enough to house 20 women and their children. The men from town, some of them, showed up to help with the heavy construction, looking awkward and earnest. They'd learned that the Bennett Ranch wasn't going anywhere, so they might as well be on the right side of it. Jim Warren came most often. He'd bring his tools and work alongside Cole without talking much, but there was an understanding between them that hadn't existed before. "Town's different now," Jim said one afternoon while they were framing walls. "People are talking different, thinking different." "About what?" "About how things should be. Pastor Monroe did a whole sermon about mercy and helping people even when it's hard. Council's been getting letters from folks saying maybe the old ways weren't working so good." He hammered in a nail with more force than necessary. "You and Evelyn, you shook things up. Not everyone likes it, but everyone respects it." Cole didn't know what to do with that information, so he just kept building. Evelyn spent those months teaching the women skills they'd need to make the settlement truly self-sufficient. Sarah already knew animal husbandry, so she took charge of the expanding livestock operation. Beth had worked in a textile mill before her husband died, so she organized a sewing operation that turned out clothes and blankets they could trade. Lucy, who'd arrived pregnant and terrified, gave birth to a healthy daughter, and then immediately started teaching the other women about medicinal herbs she'd learned from her grandmother. Every woman brought something. Every woman mattered. The twins turned one in March. Evelyn made them a cake from precious sugar and eggs, and the whole settlement celebrated like it was a holiday. James took his first wobbly steps that day, arms outstretched toward Cole. Daniel followed 10 minutes later, competitive even as a toddler. Evelyn watched them stumble around the cabin, chasing each other and laughing, and felt her throat get tight. These boys had no memory of almost dying. No memory of the desperate woman who'd ridden through a blizzard to save them. To them, this was just life. This was normal. And maybe that was the point. Maybe that was what they'd been building all along. A place where children could just be children instead of casualties of their parents' mistakes. "You all right?" Cole asked, coming up beside her. "Yeah, just thinking." "About?" "About how we got here, all of it." She watched James crash into a chair and immediately get back up, undeterred. "A year ago, I thought my life was over. Thought I'd lost everything that mattered. And now..." She gestured at the room full of people, the noise and chaos and community. Now you run a small kingdom, Cole finished. I don't run anything. We all run it together. You keep saying that, but everyone here knows the truth. You're the reason this place exists. You're what holds it together. Evelyn turned to look at him. They'd been living together for over a year now, raising the twins side by side, building this community from scratch, but there were still things they hadn't said out loud. Things that hung in the air between them every night when they sat by the fire after everyone else had gone to bed. "Cole, I want to marry you," he said abruptly. Evelyn's brain stopped working for a second. "What?" "I want to marry you, for real. Not because the town thinks we should, or because it'd be proper, or any of that garbage. Because I can't imagine doing this with anyone else. Because you're the strongest person I've ever met. Because those boys love you, and I—" He stopped, took a breath. "Because I love you, and I'm done pretending I don't." The cabin noise faded into background static. Evelyn stared at this man who'd let her into his life when she had nothing, who'd fought beside her against impossible odds, who'd become her partner in every way that mattered. "You love me," she repeated, like she needed to hear it again to believe it. "Yeah. Have for a while now. Just took me time to admit it. We're broke. The settlement's barely stable. We've got 50 people depending on us and winter coming again and 100 problems we haven't solved yet. I know. So this is terrible timing. Probably the worst. And you still want to get married?" Cole smiled, and it was the real smile she saw so rarely, the one that made him look years younger, especially because of all that. "I want to face all of it with you, officially, so everyone knows you're not just helping me out of pity. You're choosing this, choosing us." Evelyn felt tears start and didn't try to stop them. "You're an idiot. You keep saying that because it keeps being true. So is that a yes?" She grabbed his shirt and pulled him down to kiss her, hard and quick and in front of everyone in the cabin. When she pulled back, half the women were watching with knowing smiles. "That's a yes," she said. The celebration that followed was spontaneous and chaotic. Sarah immediately started planning a wedding. Beth declared she'd make Evelyn a dress. The children ran around screaming because the adults were happy, and that meant something good was happening. Only Lucy looked concerned. She pulled Evelyn aside while the chaos continued. "You sure about this?" Lucy asked quietly. "You don't have to marry him just because he asked. You've already got a life here." "I know, but I want this. I want him. Not because I need to or because it makes sense, but because I can't imagine my life without him in it anymore." Lucy studied her face, then nodded. "All right then. Just making sure you're doing it for the right reasons." "What are the right reasons?" "Whatever makes you happy. That's all that matters." They got married on a Sunday in April, outside under a sky so blue it hurt to look at. The whole settlement turned out, plus people from town who'd made the trip. Even Margaret came, looking uncomfortable and stiff but present. Evelyn wore the dress Beth had made, simple cotton dyed soft blue. Nothing fancy but clean and new and hers. Cole wore his good shirt and looked terrified right up until Evelyn took his hand. Then he just looked happy. Pastor Monroe officiated, and Evelyn could tell he was trying hard to make it meaningful without being preachy. He talked about partnership and choosing to build something together, about how love wasn't always easy, but it was always worth fighting for. When they got to the vows, Cole went first. "I'm not good with words," he started. "Never have been. But I can promise you this. I'll work hard. I'll fight for you and those boys and this place we built. I'll try to be worthy of what you've given me, and I'll love you every single day, even when you're being stubborn and impossible." "Especially when I'm being stubborn and impossible," Evelyn corrected. Yeah. Evelyn took a breath. She'd thought about what to say, but now that the moment was here, the prepared words felt wrong. So she just spoke from her chest. "A year ago, I thought I was broken beyond repair. I thought there was nothing left of me that mattered. You proved me wrong. Not by fixing me, I'm still broken in a lot of ways, but by showing me that broken people can still build something beautiful. So I promise to keep building with you, to keep fighting when things get hard, to love you and those boys and everyone here who needs a place to belong. That's all I've got, but I'll give it to you every day for the rest of my life." There wasn't a dry eye in the crowd. They were declared married, and Cole kissed her like they were the only two people in the world. The settlement erupted in cheers. The celebration lasted all day. There was food, more than they could afford, but everyone had contributed something. There was music from a fiddle player who'd shown up from one of the neighboring ranches. There was dancing and laughter, and the kind of joy that came from watching two people who'd fought so hard finally get something good. Margaret approached Evelyn near sunset while Cole was being congratulated by half the settlement.
"You look happy," Margaret said. It wasn't quite an apology, but it was close. "I am. I was wrong about you. About this whole thing." Margaret gestured at the settlement. "I thought you'd destroy yourself chasing something impossible. Instead, you built—" She stopped. "I don't even know what to call it." "Home," Evelyn said simply. "We built a home."
Margaret nodded slowly. Robert's been different since the food shortage. Quieter. Thinking more. I think watching you save everyone when you had every reason not to changed something in him. People can change if they want to badly enough. Can I— Margaret hesitated. "Can I come visit sometimes? See how you're doing?" It was the closest thing to an olive branch Evelyn had gotten from her sister in years. She thought about everything that had happened between them, all the hurt and resentment and words that couldn't be taken back. Then she thought about mercy. About choosing to be better than the cruelty that tried to break you. "Yeah," Evelyn said. "You can visit?" Margaret's shoulders sagged with relief. "Thank you." She left before it could get more emotional, but it was enough. It was a start. The twins spent the whole celebration being passed from person to person, soaking up attention like they'd been born for it. By the time the sun set, both of them were asleep on a blanket surrounded by a pile of children who'd conked out mid-play. Evelyn and Cole stood at the edge of the gathering, watching their community celebrate. "We did it," Cole said quietly. "Did what?" "Survived. More than survived. We actually made something that works. For now." "You always have to add that, don't you?" "Someone has to be realistic." Cole pulled her close, and Evelyn leaned into him, tired and happy and already thinking about all the things they'd need to do tomorrow. But tomorrow could wait. Tonight was for this, for standing with the man she loved, watching the community they'd built together, and letting herself believe that maybe, just maybe, they'd actually won. Summer came in hot and relentless. The settlement had grown to 63 people, and they needed every single one to manage the expanded operations. The farm was producing enough to feed everyone with surplus to trade. The livestock operation had tripled. The sewing collective was turning out goods that merchants fought over. The Bennett Ranch had become the Bennett settlement, and it was thriving. But success brought new problems. Arguments broke out over resources. Some women wanted to expand faster. Others worried about growing too quickly. There were personality conflicts, disagreements about how to raise the children, debates over whether to allow men to join the settlement if they had nowhere else to go. Evelyn spent most of her time mediating disputes and trying to keep everyone moving in the same direction. It was exhausting work, harder than farming or building or any of the physical labor she'd done. "I didn't sign up to be mayor of this place," she complained to Cole one night. "Too late. You already are." "Can I resign?" "No." "Why not?" "Because everyone here trusts you, including me." That was the problem, Evelyn thought. Everyone trusted her to make the right decisions, but she was still just guessing half the time, still figuring it out as she went. But she kept going because the alternative was letting everyone down. One afternoon in July, a woman arrived alone on a horse that looked like it had been ridden too hard for too long. She slid off the saddle and nearly collapsed, catching herself on the fence post. Evelyn came running from the garden. "Are you hurt?" "No, I need help, please." They got her inside and gave her water. Her name was Catherine Miller, and she'd ridden for 3 days straight from a settlement 2 territories away. "My husband died 6 months ago," Catherine said, hands shaking around the cup. "Left me with 4 children and debts I can't pay. His brother claimed the farm, said I had no right to it. Threw us out last week. I heard about this place from a traveling merchant. He said you take people in." Evelyn looked at Cole. They were already stretched thin. 4 more children meant more food, more space, more resources they didn't quite have. But she knew what the answer had to be. "You can stay," Evelyn said. "We'll make room." Catherine started crying. Thank you so much." They made room. They always did. By August, the settlement was bursting at the seams. They had 74 people and counting. Cole started planning a fourth bunkhouse, but they were running out of buildable space close to the main buildings. "We need to expand the property," he said, showing Evelyn his rough maps. "Buy the adjacent land, clear more fields, build permanent structures instead of these temporary fixes. That takes money we don't have. We've got trade goods. We could leverage those, maybe get a loan from one of the merchants who owes us favors. Or we could talk to the town council," Evelyn said slowly. "Ask them to help fund the expansion in exchange for taking some of the burden off them. There are still women in town who need help, but won't come here because it's too full." Cole stared at her. "You want to ask Robert Finch for money?" "I want to ask the council to invest in something that benefits everyone. Frame it right, and they'll realize it's in their best interest." It took 3 weeks to set up the meeting. The council was skeptical at first, but Evelyn came prepared with numbers showing how many women they'd already helped, how much that reduced strain on the town's resources, how expansion would benefit the entire valley. Robert Finch listened to her presentation with an unreadable expression. "So you want us to pay for you to build a bigger refuge," he said when she finished. "I want you to invest in a community that's already proven it works, that feeds itself, supports itself, and takes pressure off you when families need help. And what do we get out of it? Proof that working together is better than fighting, plus a share of the trade profits from the settlement. We're producing enough now that we could formalize business relationships, give the town first access to goods in exchange for support." The council members looked at each other. Pastor Monroe spoke up. "How much are we talking about?" Evelyn named a figure that made Robert's eyebrows shoot up. "That's a lot of money. It's an investment. You'll make it back in trade within 2 years." They argued for another hour, but eventually the council agreed to fund half the expansion costs in exchange for preferred trading rights and a share of profits. It wasn't everything Evelyn wanted, but it was enough. When she got back to the settlement and told everyone the news, the celebration was immediate and loud. "We're actually doing this," Sarah said, looking stunned. "We're actually building something permanent." "Yeah," Evelyn said. "We are." Construction started in September. The expanded settlement would include proper houses instead of bunkhouses, a communal kitchen big enough to feed 100 people, and a school building for the growing number of children. It was ambitious. Maybe too ambitious. But they built it anyway. Evelyn found out she was pregnant in October. She'd suspected for a few weeks, but hadn't wanted to admit it. Her body felt different in ways that scared her after what had happened with her first pregnancy. But when the morning sickness hit and wouldn't stop, she couldn't deny it anymore. She told Cole on a night when the twins were actually sleeping and the cabin was quiet. "I'm pregnant," she said without preamble. Cole froze in the middle of banking the fire. "You're... what?" "Pregnant. About 3 months, I think." He turned to look at her and she saw a dozen emotions cross his face at once. Joy, fear, hope, worry. How do you feel about it?" "Terrified," Evelyn admitted. "But also, I don't know. Ready, maybe? I couldn't save my first baby, but I've kept the twins alive for almost 2 years now, so maybe I can do this." Cole crossed the room and pulled her into his arms. "You can do anything, but you're not doing it alone this time. Promise?" "Promise." The settlement rallied around her pregnancy like it was a communal project. Lucy made sure she ate properly. Sarah took over the heavy work. Beth sewed baby clothes even though Evelyn told her it was too early to be making preparations. "Nonsense," Beth said. "This baby's going to have everything. We'll make sure of it." The twins, now rambunctious toddlers who spoke in short, demanding sentences, seemed to sense something was different. They got more clingy, more protective. James started bringing Evelyn things, rocks, sticks, once a very confused chicken, like offerings. Daniel appointed himself her guardian and glared at anyone who got too close. "They're going to be impossible when the baby actually arrives," Cole observed. "They're already impossible." Fair point. Winter came again, but this time they were ready. The new buildings were finished enough to use. They had more than enough food stored. The women had organized into such efficient teams that the settlement ran like a well-oiled machine. Margaret started visiting regularly, bringing small gifts and awkwardly trying to rebuild the relationship she'd destroyed. Evelyn let her, mostly because holding grudges took energy she didn't have anymore.
"You're glowing," Margaret said one afternoon while they sat on the porch watching the children play. "I know people say that about pregnant women, but you actually are. You look happy." "I am happy, terrified and exhausted and worried about 1,000 things, but happy. That's all anyone can ask for, I think." They sat in comfortable silence, and Evelyn thought about how far they'd both come. How many things had to break before they could build something better? The baby came in March during a late snowstorm that reminded Evelyn too much of the night her daughter had died. But this time was different. This time she had Lucy acting as midwife, Sarah keeping the twins occupied, Cole holding her hand and refusing to leave no matter how much she yelled at him. And this time, when the baby finally arrived after hours of brutal labor, she cried immediately, loud, angry, healthy crying that was the most beautiful sound Evelyn had ever heard. "It's a girl," Lucy announced, cleaning the baby with practiced efficiency. Cole looked like he might pass out from relief. They named her Caroline, after Cole's first wife. It felt right somehow, honoring the woman who'd given him the twins, bringing her memory into this new family they'd built. The twins were fascinated by their sister. They'd sit by her cradle making nonsense sounds, bringing her toys she was too small to use, fiercely protective of this tiny person who'd invaded their world. "We're outnumbered now," Cole said one night, while Evelyn nursed Caroline and the twins slept on either side of them. "We've been outnumbered since the settlement hit 20 people. This is nothing." Fair point. Evelyn looked at her family, her husband, her sons, her daughter, and felt something settle in her chest that she'd been chasing since the night she'd ridden through that first blizzard. She felt complete. Spring brought changes beyond the baby. The settlement officially incorporated as its own community with elected leadership. Evelyn ran for the council seat everyone assumed she'd take and won unanimously. Sarah became head of agricultural operations. Beth managed trade relations. Lucy oversaw medical care and education. They'd built a government that actually worked because everyone had a stake in making it work. The town started sending people to study their model, how they organized labor, how they managed resources, how they made decisions collectively instead of top-down. Other settlements began forming based on what the Bennett community had pioneered. It wasn't a revolution. It was something quieter and more sustainable. It was proof that people could build something better when they stopped telling each other how to live and started helping each other survive. Robert Finch came to Evelyn one afternoon in May. She was in the new communal kitchen helping prepare dinner for 93 people. "Can we talk?" he asked. They went outside where it was quieter. Robert looked uncomfortable, which had become his default expression around her. "I wanted to apologize," he said. "Properly. For everything I did. Trying to drive you away, turning the town against you, all of it. I was wrong." "Yeah, you were. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know I recognize what I did, and I'm trying to be better." Evelyn studied him. He looked older than she remembered, worn down by whatever internal reckoning he'd been going through. "Why now?" she asked. "Because my daughter asked me yesterday why we were ever mean to you, and I couldn't give her an answer that made sense. The best I could come up with was that we were scared of what you represented. Change. Women making their own choices. People succeeding outside the rules we'd set up." He shook his head. "That's not a good enough reason to try to destroy someone." "No, it's not. So I'm sorry, for what it's worth." Evelyn thought about mercy, about choosing to be better than the cruelty that had almost destroyed her. "It's worth something," she said. "Thank you." Robert nodded and left, and Evelyn stood there thinking about how people could change, how damage could be repaired if both sides were willing to try. It didn't fix everything. Some wounds ran too deep for simple apologies. But it was a start. She went back inside and finished helping with dinner, surrounded by women who'd become her family, children who'd learned that safety was possible, and the knowledge that what they'd built here would outlast all of them. Mike. 5 years later, Evelyn stood on the porch of the main house and looked out at the settlement that had grown beyond anything she'd imagined that first desperate night. There were 15 permanent buildings now, a school where 30 children learned reading, writing, arithmetic, and practical skills, a medical clinic that Lucy ran with 2 other women she'd trained, workshops for textiles, woodworking, metalwork, fields that stretched to the horizon, carefully tended and producing more than enough to feed everyone with surplus to trade. The twins were 7 now, wild and loud and completely convinced they ran the place. Caroline was 5, quieter than her brothers, but twice as stubborn. There was also 3-year-old Thomas, named for Evelyn's first husband, and baby Sarah, named for the woman who'd been Evelyn's right hand since the beginning. The settlement had grown to over 200 people. Not all women anymore. They'd started accepting men who needed help, families who'd lost everything, anyone who was willing to work and contribute. It had become something bigger than a refuge. It had become a real community. Cole came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. He had gray in his hair now, lines around his eyes from years of hard work and harder decisions. But he was still solid, still steady, still hers. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "How we got here. Everything that had to go wrong before it could go right." "A lot of things went wrong." "Yeah, but we survived them." They watched the children play in the yard, watched women working in the gardens, watched the community move through its daily rhythms with the kind of efficiency that came from practice and purpose. "You know what I realized?" Evelyn said. "I came here thinking I was saving those twins, but the truth is, they saved me. You saved me. This place saved me. I was broken and empty and convinced I had nothing left to give, and then I found a place where broken people could still matter. You built that place. You and everyone here who refused to give up. We built it together. That's what matters." Caroline came running up, demanding attention for some perceived emergency involving her brothers and a frog. Evelyn listened to the story, settled the dispute, and sent her daughter back to play with a kiss on the forehead. "Think they'll remember any of this?" Cole asked. "When they're grown, how hard it was." "I hope not. I hope they just remember feeling safe, feeling loved, feeling like they belonged. That's a good legacy. It's the only one that matters." They stood together watching their children, their community, the life they'd built from nothing but desperation and hope, and the refusal to let the world tell them they didn't deserve better. Evelyn thought about her daughter, buried under that wooden cross, about the woman she'd been who rode through a blizzard believing her life was over. That woman wouldn't recognize who she'd become, stronger, scarred, but somehow whole in ways she'd never been before. Life hadn't stopped being hard. There were still problems to solve, conflicts to mediate, disasters to survive. But they faced them together now. All of them. The unwanted, the abandoned, the people who'd been told they didn't matter. They'd proven everyone wrong. And under the endless sky, in the settlement that had grown from 2 dying babies and a woman who refused to let them go, Evelyn finally understood something she'd been searching for all along. She hadn't ridden out that night to save someone else. She'd ridden out to save herself. And in the process, she'd found something more valuable than redemption or forgiveness or any single moment of grace. She'd found a family, a purpose, a reason to wake up fighting. She'd found home. And that, in the end, was everything.